Sarah Martinez never imagined that marrying widower Robert Chen would lead her down such a dark path. When she first met Robert at a charity gala in downtown Los Angeles, he seemed like the perfect catch. A successful real estate developer with kind eyes and a gentle smile, Robert had been raising his 12-year-old daughter Emma alone for 3 years after his first wife died in a car accident. Sarah, a pharmaceutical sales representative, was immediately drawn to Robert's dedication to his daughter. She watched how he carefully cut Emma's food at the charity dinner, how he listened intently when she whispered something in his ear, and how his face lit up whenever she laughed. Sarah had always wanted children but had never found the right partner. At 35, she thought this might be her chance at the family she'd always dreamed of. The courtship was swift and romantic. Robert showered Sarah with expensive gifts and took her to the finest restaurants in the city. He seemed genuinely interested in her work and asked detailed questions about her pharmaceutical knowledge. Sarah found his curiosity endearing, never suspecting it would later become relevant in the most sinister way. Emma, however, was a different story entirely. From the moment Sarah entered their lives, the young girl made it clear that she wasn't welcome. Emma would roll her eyes whenever Sarah spoke, refuse to eat meals Sarah prepared, and constantly bring up memories of her deceased mother. During family dinners, Emma would say things like, "Mommy used to make this better," or, "Daddy, remember when Mommy took me to that place?" Sarah tried to be patient, understanding that grief affected children differently. The tension reached a breaking point during a weekend trip to Disneyland. Sarah had spent weeks planning the perfect family outing, hoping to bond with Emma over rides and cotton candy. Instead, Emma spent the entire day comparing everything to previous trips with her biological mother. When Sarah tried to take a family photo in front of Sleeping Beauty's castle, Emma crossed her arms and refused to smile. "I don't want her in our picture," Emma declared loudly, causing other families to stare. "She's not my real mom, and she never will be." Robert gently scolded his daughter, but Sarah could see the exhaustion in his eyes. That night, as they drove home in uncomfortable silence, Sarah realized that winning Emma's affection would be much harder than she'd anticipated. She began to wonder if love would be enough to overcome the obstacles ahead. After Robert and Sarah married in a small ceremony 6 months later, the situation at home became increasingly difficult. Emma's behavior escalated from mere rudeness to outright sabotage. She would accidentally break Sarah's belongings, hide her work documents, and even spread rumors at school that Sarah was mean to her. The school counselor called several times, expressing concern about Emma's emotional state and her claims about her home life. Sarah found herself walking on eggshells in her own home. She tried everything she could think of to connect with Emma. She bought her expensive clothes and the latest gadgets, enrolled her in dance classes she'd mentioned wanting to try, and even learned to cook Emma's favorite foods. Nothing worked. If anything, Emma seemed to resent these gestures even more. The breaking point came during Emma's 13th birthday party. Sarah had spent weeks organizing what she hoped would be the perfect celebration. She rented a pavilion at Emma's favorite park, hired a DJ, and invited all of Emma's classmates. She even had a custom cake made featuring Emma's favorite cartoon character. Everything seemed to be going well until Emma opened her presents. When she got to Sarah's gift, a beautiful silver necklace with Emma's birthstone, the teenager's face twisted with disgust. "I don't want anything from you," Emma announced in front of all her friends and their parents. "You're just trying to replace my real mom, and it's never going to work." She threw the jewelry box on the ground, where it cracked open and the necklace scattered across the grass. The party fell silent as parents exchanged uncomfortable glances, and children stared wide-eyed at the drama unfolding before them. Robert immediately intervened, taking Emma aside for a stern conversation while Sarah tried to salvage the celebration. But the damage was done. Several parents made excuses and left early with their children, and Sarah spent the rest of the party fighting back tears while cleaning up scattered wrapping paper and untouched cake. That night, after Emma had gone to bed without apologizing, Robert sat Sarah down for a serious conversation. He acknowledged that his daughter's behavior was unacceptable, but he also expressed his own frustration with the situation. He loved both Sarah and Emma, but felt torn between them constantly. "I don't know what else to do," Robert admitted, running his hands through his hair. "Emma has been through so much trauma, and I keep hoping that time will heal these wounds. But I can't let her treat you this way anymore." Sarah appreciated Robert's support, but she could see the toll the family conflict was taking on him. His successful business was starting to suffer as he spent more time dealing with drama at home. He'd lost weight and developed dark circles under his eyes from stress and sleepless nights. As Sarah lay in bed that night, listening to Robert toss and turn beside her, a dark thought crept into her mind. What if Emma never accepted her? What if this situation never improved? She pushed the thought away immediately, ashamed of even considering such a thing. Emma was just a child dealing with loss and change. Surely, with enough patience and love, they could become a real family. But deep down, Sarah began to realize that her fairy tale ending might be turning into something much darker. The perfect life she'd envisioned was crumbling around her, and she felt increasingly desperate to find a solution. She had no idea that her growing desperation would soon lead her to consider options that would change all their lives forever. The seeds of resentment had been planted, and they were beginning to grow in Sarah's heart, slowly poisoning her thoughts and pushing her toward a decision that would ultimately backfire in the most shocking way imaginable. The idea first entered Sarah's mind during a particularly difficult night in November. Emma had thrown another tantrum, this time because Sarah had accidentally used her special coffee mug. The 13-year-old had screamed that it belonged to her dead mother, and that Sarah had no right to touch anything that had belonged to her. The fight escalated until Emma locked herself in her room, sobbing dramatically about how much she missed her real mom. Robert had spent 2 hours trying to calm his daughter down, missing an important business call in the process. When he finally emerged from Emma's room, he looked defeated and exhausted. Sarah watched him pour himself a large glass of wine and collapse onto the couch, staring blankly at the television. "I can't keep doing this," he whispered, more to himself than to Sarah. "Something has to change." That night, Sarah found herself researching child psychology articles online, desperately searching for solutions. As she scrolled through various websites, she stumbled across a forum where step-parents shared their struggles. Some of the stories made her own situation seem mild by comparison, but others offered hope with tales of eventual reconciliation and blended family success. However, buried deep in one thread, she found a post that made her pause. An anonymous user had written about how their stepchild had become seriously ill and how that illness had somehow brought the family together. The step-parent described how the child had finally appreciated their care and attention during the recovery period, leading to a breakthrough in their relationship. Sarah stared at the screen for a long time, a terrible idea beginning to form in her mind. What if Emma got sick? Not seriously. Just enough to need Sarah's care? Maybe then the stubborn girl would finally see how much Sarah wanted to help and love her. Maybe a period of vulnerability would break down Emma's walls and allow them to connect. The thought horrified Sarah at first, and she quickly closed her laptop and went to bed. But the idea lingered, growing stronger each time Emma rejected her. Attempts at kindness. Sarah began to notice how Emma would sometimes soften when she wasn't feeling well, accepting soup and gentle care without her usual hostility. Sarah's background in pharmaceutical sales gave her extensive knowledge about medications and their effects. She knew which substances could cause mild illness without serious harm. She told herself she would never actually hurt Emma, just create an opportunity for them to bond during a minor illness. The rational part of Sarah's mind knew this was wrong, but her desperation grew stronger each day. She watched Robert grow, more distant and stressed, and she feared their marriage wouldn't survive much longer under the constant pressure. She needed Emma to accept her, not just for her own happiness, but to save her relationship with Robert. The final straw came during Emma's school winter concert in December. Sarah had taken time off work to attend, hoping to show support for Emma's solo performance in the choir. She'd even brought flowers and had planned to take the family out for a celebration dinner afterward. Emma's performance was beautiful, and Sarah felt genuinely proud of her stepdaughter's talent. After the concert, as families gathered in the lobby, Sarah approached Emma with the bouquet of flowers and a warm smile. "You were amazing up there," Sarah said sincerely. "Your voice is so beautiful." Emma looked at the flowers with disgust and then glanced around to make sure her friends were watching. "I don't want your stupid flowers," she said loudly. "My real mom would have brought me roses, not these cheap things." She knocked the bouquet out of Sarah's hands, sending the flowers scattering across the floor. Other parents turned to stare, as Sarah knelt to gather the scattered blooms, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. Emma walked away to join her friends, leaving Sarah alone on the floor, while Robert hurried over to help clean up the mess. The drive home was silent, except for Robert's quiet lecture to Emma about respect and kindness. But Sarah barely heard it. Something had snapped inside her during that moment of public humiliation. She was tired of being the villain in Emma's story, tired of having her efforts thrown back in her face, and tired of watching her marriage slowly deteriorate. That night, after Robert and Emma had gone to bed, Sarah went into her home office and began researching more seriously. She told herself she was just looking, just considering options. She wasn't actually going to do anything harmful. Sarah knew that certain medications could cause temporary digestive issues that would require rest and care but wouldn't cause lasting damage. She had access to various pharmaceutical samples through her work, and she understood dosages and effects better than most people. She could create a situation where Emma needed her help, where the girl would have to depend on her and maybe finally see that Sarah truly cared. The plan began to take shape slowly. Sarah would start with very mild doses of a digestive medication that would cause some nausea and stomach discomfort. Nothing serious, just enough to make Emma feel unwell and need care. During Emma's recovery, Sarah would be the perfect caregiver, bringing soup, offering comfort, and showing the kind of maternal love Emma had been rejecting. Sarah convinced herself that this wasn't really harming Emma. It was helping their relationship. Once Emma experienced Sarah's genuine care during a vulnerable time, she would finally understand that Sarah wasn't trying to replace her mother, but simply wanted to love her as she was. The opportunity presented itself during the winter break. When Robert had to travel to San Francisco for a business conference, he would be gone for 3 days, leaving Sarah alone with Emma for the first time since they'd been married. Sarah saw this as the perfect chance to put her plan into action. She carefully calculated the timing and dosage, using her pharmaceutical knowledge to ensure Emma would experience discomfort but not danger. She planned to administer the medication on the second day of Robert's trip, giving her time to care for Emma and hopefully bond with her before Robert returned. As the date approached, Sarah felt a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. She knew what she was planning was wrong, but she'd convinced herself it was necessary. She'd tried everything else and nothing had worked. This was her last chance to save her family and create the loving home she'd always dreamed of. Sarah had no idea that her desperate plan would soon spiral completely out of control, leading to consequences she never could have imagined. Her attempt to create a bonding opportunity through induced illness would backfire in a way that would change all their lives forever and expose the true nature of the relationships in their household. The morning Robert left for his San Francisco business trip, Sarah woke up with butterflies in her stomach. She made breakfast for him and Emma, trying to act normally while her heart pounded with nervousness about what she was planning to do. Robert kissed her goodbye and reminded Emma to be good while he was away. "Take care of each other," he said, grabbing his suitcase and heading toward the door. "I'll call tonight to check in." Emma barely looked up from her cereal, already making it clear that she planned to ignore Sarah for the entire 3 days. As soon as Robert's car pulled out of the driveway, Emma announced she would be staying in her room and didn't want to be bothered. Sarah spent the first day trying to act normally, going about her usual routine of cleaning and preparing meals. She offered to make Emma lunch, but the teenager came downstairs, grabbed some snacks, and returned to her room without speaking. Sarah told herself this behavior was exactly why her plan was necessary. Emma needed to learn that Sarah wasn't her enemy. That evening, Sarah called Robert as promised and assured him everything was fine. Emma spoke to her father briefly, complaining that she was bored but not mentioning any problems with Sarah. After hanging up, Emma returned to her room, and Sarah spent the rest of the night rehearsing what she would do the next day. The second morning arrived gray and cloudy, matching Sarah's anxious mood. She prepared Emma's favorite breakfast, chocolate chip pancakes, hoping to start the day on a positive note before implementing her plan. To her surprise, Emma actually came downstairs and ate at the kitchen table instead of taking food to her room. "These are good," Emma admitted grudgingly, which was probably the first compliment she'd ever given Sarah. For a moment, Sarah felt a flicker of hope. Maybe she didn't need to go through with her plan. Maybe Emma was finally starting to warm up to her naturally. But then Emma added, "Dad usually burns them when he tries to make them." The casual dismissal reminded Sarah that Emma was only being civil, because Robert wasn't there to witness her usual hostility. Sarah's resolve hardened. She needed to create a situation where Emma would have to depend on her completely. Sarah had prepared everything carefully. She had a mild digestive medication that would cause stomach discomfort and nausea, unpleasant but not dangerous. She'd calculated the perfect dosage to make Emma feel sick enough to need care, but not so sick as to require hospitalization. The opportunity came during lunch preparation. Emma had requested grilled cheese sandwiches, and Sarah saw her chance. While the butter was melting in the pan, she quickly crushed the medication and mixed it into Emma's sandwich before grilling it. Her hands shook slightly as she watched the sandwich cook, knowing there was no going back once Emma ate it. Emma consumed the entire sandwich without suspicion, even thanking Sarah for making it exactly the way she liked it. Sarah felt a stab of guilt watching Emma eat so trustingly, but she pushed the feeling aside. This was for the good of their family, she told herself. Sometimes difficult situations require difficult solutions. About 2 hours later, Emma began complaining of stomach pain. She came downstairs looking pale and holding her abdomen, asking if Sarah had any medicine for nausea. Sarah felt a mixture of guilt and satisfaction. The medication was working exactly as planned. "Oh, honey, you don't look well at all," Sarah said, putting on her most caring voice. "Come sit down and I'll get you some ginger ale." Emma allowed Sarah to help her to the couch, where she curled up with a blanket. For the first time since Sarah had known her, Emma seemed vulnerable and willing to accept help. Sarah brought her small sips of ginger ale and a cool washcloth for her forehead. "Thank you," Emma whispered, closing her eyes as Sarah gently pressed the cloth to her fevered brow. "My stomach really hurts." Sarah's heart swelled with a mixture of satisfaction and genuine concern. This was exactly what she'd hoped for, Emma finally accepting her care and kindness. She spent the afternoon tending to the sick girl, bringing soup and crackers, adjusting pillows, and even reading to her from a book Emma had mentioned liking. As the evening progressed, however, Emma's condition began to worsen in ways Sarah hadn't anticipated. Instead of experiencing mild discomfort that would resolve overnight, Emma began vomiting violently and developed a high fever. Sarah started to panic as she realized something was going very wrong. "I feel really sick," Emma moaned, her face flushed and her breathing shallow. "Something's really wrong with me." Sarah checked and rechecked her calculations, trying to figure out what had gone wrong. She'd been so careful with the dosage, but Emma's reaction was far more severe than anything she'd expected. Maybe Emma had an unknown sensitivity to the medication, or perhaps it had interacted with something else in her system. By midnight, Emma was barely conscious, mumbling incoherently, and running a dangerously high fever. Sarah knew she should call 911, but she was terrified of the questions that would follow. How would she explain Emma's sudden illness? What if the doctors figured out she'd been poisoned? Sarah tried calling Robert, but his phone went straight to voicemail. She remembered he'd mentioned having late business dinners and often turned off his phone during important meetings. She left a message saying Emma wasn't feeling well, but tried to keep the panic out of her voice. As the night wore on, Emma's condition continued to deteriorate. She began having difficulty breathing and couldn't keep even small sips of water down. Sarah paced the living room, watching Emma's labored breathing and realizing she might have made a terrible, irreversible mistake. The guilt was overwhelming. She'd only wanted to create an opportunity to bond with Emma, not to seriously harm her. But as she watched the 13-year-old girl struggle with symptoms that were far beyond what Sarah had intended, she realized her plan had gone horribly wrong. At 3 in the morning, when Emma's fever spiked to 104 degrees and she became completely unresponsive, Sarah finally made the call she should have made hours earlier. With shaking hands, she dialed 911. "My stepdaughter is very sick," she told the dispatcher, trying to keep her voice steady. "She has a high fever and she's not responding. Please send an ambulance right away." As Sarah waited for the paramedics to arrive, she knelt beside Emma's still form and whispered apologies that the unconscious girl couldn't hear. She'd wanted so desperately to be the hero in Emma's story, the caring stepmother who provided comfort during illness. Instead, she realized she might have become something much worse. The sound of approaching sirens filled the quiet night, and Sarah knew her carefully planned attempt to win Emma's love was about to unravel in ways she never could have imagined. The paramedics arrived within minutes of Sarah's frantic call, their red and blue lights casting eerie shadows across the living room where Emma lay unconscious on the couch. Sarah watched in growing terror as the medical team immediately began, working on the teenage girl, checking her vital signs, and asking rapid-fire questions about her symptoms. "When did she first start feeling sick?" asked the lead paramedic, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes but a no-nonsense demeanor. "Around 2 this afternoon," Sarah replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "She complained of stomach pain and nausea. I thought it was just a stomach bug." "Has she eaten anything unusual today? Any new medications or supplements?" The paramedic continued, while her partner inserted an IV into Emma's arm. Sarah's mouth went dry. "No, nothing unusual. Just normal meals." The lie felt like acid in her throat. Emma's breathing was shallow and labored, and her skin had taken on a grayish pallor that terrified Sarah. This was nothing like the mild discomfort she had planned to induce. Something had gone terribly, catastrophically wrong. "We need to get her to the hospital immediately," the lead paramedic announced. "Her temperature is dangerously high, and she's showing signs of severe toxicity." The word toxicity hit Sarah like a physical blow. As they loaded Emma onto a stretcher, one of the paramedics asked if Sarah wanted to ride in the ambulance. She nodded numbly, grabbing her purse and phone while trying to call Robert again. Still no answer. During the harrowing ambulance ride to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, Sarah watched the paramedics work frantically to stabilize Emma. They administered medications, monitored her heart rate, and radioed ahead to the emergency room with updates about her condition. Sarah had never felt so helpless or terrified in her life. "Is she going to be okay?" Sarah whispered to the paramedic monitoring. Emma's vital signs. We're doing everything we can, came the professional but non-committal response. The doctors at the hospital will be able to tell you more. At the hospital, Emma was immediately rushed into the emergency room while Sarah was directed to a waiting area to complete paperwork. Her hands shook as she filled out forms, providing Emma's medical history and insurance information. When asked about Emma's father, she explained that Robert was out of town and she was trying to reach him. Dr. Patricia Williams, the attending emergency physician, came to speak with Sarah after Emma had been stabilized and admitted to the intensive care unit. Dr. Williams was a tall, serious-looking woman in her 50s who got straight to the point. Emma is in critical condition, she explained. Her symptoms suggest possible poisoning, though we're still running tests to determine the exact cause. Her liver and kidneys are showing signs of stress, and we're concerned about potential organ damage. Sarah felt the world spinning around her. Poisoning? But how is that possible? That's what we're trying to determine, Dr. Williams said, studying Sarah carefully. We need to know everything Emma ate or drank in the past 24 hours. Sometimes poisoning can be accidental. Contaminated food, cleaning products, even certain plants can cause these symptoms. Sarah provided a detailed account of Emma's meals, carefully omitting any mention of the medication she had added to the grilled cheese sandwich. She suggested that maybe Emma had eaten something at a friend's house or gotten into something without Sarah's knowledge. We've contacted poison control and they're sending a specialist, Dr. Williams continued. In the meantime, we're doing everything we can to support her organ function and flush the toxins from her system. The next 24 hours will be critical. After the doctor left, Sarah finally reached Robert. His phone had been in his hotel room while he was at a late business dinner, and he'd just returned to find her increasingly frantic voicemails. What do you mean she's been poisoned? Robert's voice was sharp with panic. How did this happen? Where were you when she got sick? I don't know, Sarah sobbed into the phone. She just started feeling sick after lunch, and then she got worse and worse. The doctors say it might be poisoning, but they don't know from what yet. Robert was silent for a long moment, and Sarah could hear him breathing heavily on the other end of the line. I'm catching the first flight home, he finally said. I should be there by morning. Stay with her, Sarah. Don't leave her alone. The irony of his words wasn't lost on Sarah. Robert was asking her to protect the very child she had harmed, trusting her to be Emma's guardian when she was the source of Emma's danger. As the night wore on, Sarah kept vigil in the ICU waiting room, allowed to see Emma for only a few minutes each hour. Each time she looked at Emma's pale, still form surrounded by machines and monitors, the guilt threatened to crush her. The girl looked so small and vulnerable. Nothing like the defiant teenager who had made Sarah's life so difficult. Around dawn, Dr. Williams returned with an update and news that made Sarah's blood run cold. The toxicology results are back, the doctor said. Emma has been poisoned with a medication called metoclopramide. It's commonly used to treat nausea, but in high doses or in sensitive individuals, it can cause exactly the symptoms Emma is experiencing. Sarah's heart stopped. Metoclopramide was exactly what she had given Emma, though she'd calculated what she thought was a safe, minimal dose. The concerning thing, Dr. Williams continued, is that this medication isn't commonly found in households. It requires a prescription, and the amount in Emma's system suggests it wasn't accidental ingestion. Sarah felt sick to her stomach. What are you saying? I'm saying that someone gave this medication to Emma deliberately, Dr. Williams replied, her gaze steady and penetrating. Whether it was meant to harm her or was given for some other reason, I can't say. But this wasn't an accident. Before Sarah could respond, she saw Robert hurrying down the hospital corridor, still wearing his wrinkled business clothes from the previous day. His face was etched with worry and exhaustion, and Sarah realized that her desperate attempt to win Emma's love had instead created a nightmare that might destroy them all. As Robert rushed to Emma's bedside, Sarah knew that the truth about what she had done would soon come to light. But what she didn't realize was that the investigation into Emma's poisoning would uncover secrets that would shock everyone involved and reveal that Sarah wasn't the only one in their family with dangerous intentions. The poison plot, that was, supposed to bring Sarah and Emma closer together, was about to expose the darkest truths about their family, and the backfire would be more shocking than anyone could have imagined. Robert's arrival at the hospital brought both relief and terror for Sarah. She watched him rush to Emma's bedside, his face crumbling as he saw his daughter connected to various machines, her small body looking fragile against the white hospital sheets. The sight of his anguish made Sarah's guilt almost unbearable. "My baby girl," Robert whispered, gently stroking Emma's hand. "Daddy's here now. You're going to be okay." Dr. Williams pulled Robert aside to explain Emma's condition and the discovery that she had been deliberately poisoned. Sarah watched Robert's face change from worry to confusion to something much darker as he processed the information. Someone did this to her on purpose? Robert's voice was low and dangerous. "Who would want to hurt a 13-year-old girl?" "That's what we're trying to determine," Dr. Williams replied. "The police will want to speak with everyone who had access to Emma in the past 24 hours. They're treating this as a criminal investigation." The word criminal hit Sarah like a physical blow. She hadn't thought beyond her desperate desire to bond with Emma. The possibility of criminal charges, jail time, and losing Robert forever hadn't occurred to her when she was planning what she thought would be a mild illness. Detective Maria Rodriguez arrived at the hospital within an hour of Robert's return. She was a seasoned investigator with over 15 years of experience in crimes against children, and her sharp eyes missed nothing as she interviewed each person who had been around Emma recently. "Mrs. Chen," Detective Rodriguez began, settling into a chair across from Sarah in a private consultation room. "I understand you were alone with Emma when she became ill. Can you walk me through everything that happened yesterday?" Sarah's rehearsed story felt clumsy in her mouth as she recounted the previous day's events, carefully omitting any mention of the medication she had added to Emma's sandwich. She described Emma's symptoms, her attempts to care for the girl, and her decision to call 911 when Emma's condition worsened. "Emma ate a grilled cheese sandwich around noon," Sarah explained, trying to keep her voice steady. "That was the last thing she ate before getting sick. Maybe there was something wrong." "With the cheese or the bread?" Detective Rodriguez took careful notes, occasionally asking follow-up questions about timing, Emma's behavior, and who else might have had access to the house. Her questions were thorough but not accusatory, at least not yet. "I'll need to examine your kitchen and collect samples of any food that Emma consumed," the detective explained. "We're also going to need to account for everyone who was in contact with Emma in the past week." As the investigation progressed, Sarah began to realize that she had seriously underestimated how thoroughly poisoning cases were investigated. The police collected samples from their kitchen, interviewed Emma's friends and teachers, and even spoke with neighbors who might have seen unusual activity around their house. But the breakthrough in the case came from an unexpected source. While searching through Emma's belongings for any clues about how she might have ingested the medication, Detective Rodriguez found Emma's diary hidden under her mattress. The discovery would change everything Sarah thought she knew about her stepdaughter and her family. Emma's diary revealed a shocking truth that no one had suspected. For months, Emma had been slowly poisoning herself with small amounts of various medications, deliberately making herself sick to get attention from her father and to make Sarah's life more difficult. The diary detailed her careful planning, her research into different substances, and her satisfaction when her mysterious illnesses brought her father rushing home from work or caused problems between him and Sarah. "I took some of Dad's old prescription pills today," read one entry from 2 months earlier. "Just a little bit, not enough to really hurt me, but enough to make me feel sick. Dad was so worried and Sarah looked guilty, like maybe it was her fault. I like seeing her squirm." Another entry revealed even more disturbing details. "Sarah has been so nice to me when I'm sick. She brings me soup and sits with me, and for a minute I almost like her. But then I remember she's trying to replace Mom, and I get mad again. Maybe if I get sick enough, Dad will realize Sarah is bad luck and send her away. Detective Rodriguez called Robert and Sarah back to the hospital to discuss this shocking discovery. As she read selected passages from the diary aloud, both adults sat in stunned silence. The revelation that Emma had been deliberately making herself sick completely changed the nature of the investigation. So Emma has been poisoning herself. For months, Robert said slowly, trying to process this information. But the amount of medication in her system now is much higher than her previous incidents. Something different happened this time. Detective Rodriguez nodded grimly. That's correct. Based on the diary entries, Emma's previous self-poisoning incidents involved much smaller amounts of various medications. The level of metoclopramide in her system now is significantly higher and from a single concentrated dose. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She realized with growing horror that Emma might have taken her own dose of medication in addition to what Sarah had given her. If Emma had been planning to make herself sick that same day, she might have unknowingly doubled or tripled the amount of poison in her system. There's something else, Detective Rodriguez continued, flipping through the diary. Emma's latest entries suggest she was planning something bigger. Listen to this one from last week. Sarah has been trying so hard to be nice lately, it's actually kind of pathetic. I think it's time for a really big scare. Something that will make Dad see what kind of bad luck she brings to our family. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. Emma had been planning to severely poison herself, possibly intending to blame Sarah for it. But Sarah's own poisoning attempt had interfered with Emma's plan, creating a perfect storm that nearly killed the teenager. Robert looked at Sarah with confusion and pain in his eyes. Did you know about any of this? Did you have any idea what Emma was doing to herself? Sarah shook her head, not trusting herself to speak. How could she admit that she had been plotting to poison Emma at the same time Emma was plotting to poison herself? The coincidence was too terrible. Too unbelievable. But Detective Rodriguez's sharp eyes were studying Sarah carefully, and something in Sarah's expression must have given her away. Mrs. Chen, the detective said slowly, is there anything else you need to tell us about yesterday? Anything you might have forgotten or left out of your statement? The moment of truth had arrived, and Sarah realized that her desperate plan to win Emma's love had backfired in the most shocking way possible. Not only had she nearly killed her stepdaughter, but she had unknowingly interfered with Emma's own self-poisoning plot, creating a situation that was far more complex and dangerous than either of them had intended. As Sarah looked at Robert's questioning face and Detective Rodriguez's penetrating stare, she knew that the truth about what really happened that day would destroy whatever remained of their family. The evil stepmother's poison plot had indeed backfired, but in ways that no one could have predicted. The weight of Detective Rodriguez's question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Sarah looked between Robert's confused face and Detective Rodriguez's knowing stare, realizing that her moment of reckoning had finally arrived. Her hands trembled as she struggled with whether to continue lying or to confess the truth that would destroy everything. Sarah began, then stopped, her voice catching in her throat. The room felt like it was closing in around her, and she could feel her carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. Detective Rodriguez leaned forward slightly, her experienced eyes reading the guilt written across Sarah's face. Mrs. Chen, Emma's life was saved by very narrow margins. If there's something you're not telling us, now is the time to speak up. Any additional information could be crucial for her ongoing treatment. The mention of Emma's medical care broke through Sarah's paralysis. Despite everything that had happened, she genuinely cared about Emma's recovery and couldn't bear the thought that withholding information might harm her further. I gave her something, Sarah whispered, the words barely audible. I put medication in her grilled cheese sandwich. But I swear I never meant to hurt her seriously. I just wanted her to need me to finally accept my help. Robert's face went through a series of emotions: confusion, disbelief, horror, and finally a cold anger that Sarah had never seen before. He stood up abruptly, backing away from her as if she had become a dangerous stranger. "You poisoned my daughter?" His voice was deadly quiet. "You deliberately made her sick? It wasn't supposed to be serious," Sarah pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "I used my pharmaceutical knowledge to calculate a safe dose that would just cause mild nausea. I wanted to take care of her, to show her I could be a good mother figure. But something went wrong. Detective Rodriguez was taking rapid notes, her expression professional but grim. "What exactly did you give her and how much?" Sarah provided the details about the metoclopramide and her calculations, explaining how she had intended to create only minor discomfort. As she spoke, the horrible irony of the situation became clear to everyone in the room. "So, let me understand this," Detective Rodriguez said slowly. "You gave Emma a dose of medication to make her mildly sick, not knowing that she was already planning to poison herself that same day with her own supply of medications." "That's right," Sarah confirmed, miserably. "I had no idea about her diary or her plans. If I had known—" "The combined effect nearly killed her," Dr. Williams interjected, having joined the group when she heard about the confession. "Emma had already taken a dose of different medications earlier that day, according to what we found in her blood work. When combined with what you gave her, the toxic load became life-threatening." Robert sank back into his chair, his head in his hands. The revelation that both his wife and daughter had been plotting to poison Emma, albeit for different reasons, seemed to overwhelm him completely. "How did I not see any of this?" he asked, his voice breaking. "My own daughter was slowly killing herself for months, and my wife was planning to poison her. What kind of father am I? What kind of family have we become?" The next several hours passed in a blur of legal procedures and medical consultations. Sarah was arrested and charged with attempted poisoning and child endangerment, though the unique circumstances of the case made it unlike anything Detective Rodriguez had seen before. Emma slowly began to recover over the following days, though the damage to her liver and kidneys would require ongoing monitoring. When she was finally conscious and coherent enough to understand what had happened, her reaction shocked everyone. Instead of being angry at Sarah, Emma broke down in tears of guilt and remorse. Learning that her own self-poisoning had nearly resulted in her death, combined with Sarah's misguided attempt to help their relationship, made her realize how dangerous and destructive her behavior had become. "I'm so sorry," Emma sobbed to Sarah during a supervised hospital visit. "I never meant for anyone else to get hurt. I was just so angry about Mom dying, and I took it out on you, but you didn't deserve that." Sarah was equally emotional as she faced the teenager she had nearly killed. "I'm sorry too, Emma. I should have been patient and understanding instead of trying to force a relationship between us. I made a terrible mistake." The legal proceedings that followed were complex and unprecedented. Sarah's lawyer argued that her intent was never to harm Emma, but rather to create an opportunity for bonding, while the prosecution maintained that deliberately giving medication to a child without medical need constituted serious criminal behavior. However, Emma's own role in the incident complicated matters significantly. Her months of self-poisoning and her plan to frame Sarah for a more serious poisoning attempt painted a picture of a deeply troubled family, where everyone bore some responsibility for the tragic outcome. Robert found himself torn between anger at Sarah's betrayal and recognition that Emma's own actions had contributed to the near-fatal result. The discovery of Emma's diary also revealed the depth of her grief and anger, helping him understand that his daughter needed serious psychological help. In the end, Sarah pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of child endangerment and received 2 years of probation, mandatory counseling, and community service. The judge acknowledged the unusual circumstances of the case and the fact that Sarah's intent, while misguided, was not to cause serious harm. Emma was required to undergo extensive therapy to address her grief, anger, and self-destructive behaviors. The process was long and difficult, but it gradually helped her work through her feelings about her mother's death and her resentment towards Sarah. The most shocking twist came months later, during Emma's therapy sessions. As she worked through her emotions with a skilled counselor, Emma revealed that her self-poisoning had started as a way to get attention, but had gradually become something else entirely. "I think part of me actually wanted Sarah to be the one taking care of me when I was sick," Emma admitted to her therapist. "Even though I said I hated her, she was always so gentle and caring when I wasn't feeling well. It was the only time I felt like maybe she really did love me." This revelation suggested that despite their dysfunctional dynamic, both Sarah and Emma had been seeking the same thing, a genuine mother-daughter connection. Their misguided attempts to force this connection through deception and manipulation had nearly resulted in tragedy, but it also revealed the deep longing for family that existed beneath their conflict. Robert and Sarah ultimately divorced, the trust between them irreparably damaged by the events. However, they worked together to ensure Emma received the help she needed, and over time, Sarah and Emma developed the relationship they had both been seeking, built on honesty and genuine care rather than manipulation. The evil stepmother's poison plot had indeed backfired in the most shocking way possible, not because it failed to achieve its goal, but because it revealed that everyone in the family had been desperately seeking love and connection through the wrong methods. The near tragedy forced them all to confront their deepest fears and desires, ultimately leading to the healing and honesty that could have prevented the crisis in the first place. Years later, Emma would reflect on that terrible day as the moment her family finally stopped pretending and started truly communicating with each other. The poison that was meant to bring them together had nearly destroyed them all, but from that destruction came the foundation for genuine relationships built on truth rather than manipulation.